Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at a column from page number 7 of the Delhi edition. This column, written by Happymon Jacob, deals with India's return to Central Asia, which was marked by the inaugural India Central Asia Summit, which was held as a virtual summit during the occasion of India's Republic Day. See, recently, India has stepped up its Central Asian diplomacy and it had invited all the leaders of the five Central Asian countries as chief guests to India's Republic Day celebrations. But this visit could not take place due to the third wave of the pandemic, and hence, India decided to hold this summit in the virtual format. This happened to be the first ever India Central Asia Summit involving the leaders of India and all the five Central Asian republics. Prior to this high level engagement between the head of states and head of governments, India had been holding regular dialogues between the foreign ministers of these countries, which is called the India Central Asia Dialogue, which is a part of India's Central Asia Connect policy. Then India also recently hosted a regional security dialogue on the current situation in Afghanistan, which involved the national security advisors of India and all the Central Asian republics. These back-to-back high-level engagements between India and Central Asian countries has highlighted the importance that India is attaching to the region. So the writer states that this marks India's return to Central Asia in a bigger way, but however, the real gains from this engagement might be minimal for India, and at the same time, the cost of non-engagement with the region could prove to be very costly for India. To understand this argument of the writer, first we need to talk about the background to India-Central Asia relations. See, the Central Asia region is comprised of five Central Asian republics. This includes Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. These five Central Asian republics, they were all part of the former Soviet Union and they share key borders with Russia, China, Europe, and as well as with the Caspian Sea and Iran and Afghanistan and with Pakistan. It is this geostrategic location of Central Asian countries which makes them a critical partner for India. Upon their strategic importance, the Central Asian republics are also blessed with natural resources ranging from oil and gas, uranium, precious metals and minerals, which also includes rare earth metals, along with tremendous hydropower potential. The presence of these critical natural resources in the Central Asian region make them a very valuable partner for India and as well as for some of the big powers of the world. India, however, has shared a very close relationship with the region since the days of the Soviet Union. Even during the Soviet era, India had a trading relationship with the Central Asian countries, and many of India's defense imports from Soviet Union were being manufactured in the defense factories located in today's Central Asian countries. But the India-Central Asia relationship has a much longer history because both the regions, they share a civilizational connection. Since the ancient and medieval times, there has been a cultural and economic connect between the region, which was marked by bilateral trade through the ancient Silk Route, along with the exchange of religious and cultural influences marked by Buddhism and Islam, and even the Islamic empires of India, including the Mughal Empire, trace back their origin to the Central Asian region. For example, Babur was essentially from the Fergana Valley region, which is today located in Central Asia. Then in the modern era, that is post-1950s, India has always shared very close cultural links with the Central Asian region, and India happens to enjoy tremendous soft power in these countries. In all the Central Asian countries, India's art and culture, especially classical art forms, they happen to be very popular, and even Indian movies, music, and food has found a wide acceptance in the Central Asian region. But despite sharing this close cultural and historical connect, India and Central Asia have a major constraint to their relationship. This constraint is a result of geography because the Central Asian countries are landlocked countries, as you can see in this map. You should note that the Caspian Sea, you can see over here, is not an open sea, and the Central Asian republics are essentially bound by land on all the sides. However, India could have possibly accessed Central Asia via Afghanistan if we had control over this region, known as the Wakhan Corridor. But this narrow land corridor, which was supposed to connect India and Afghanistan, has been occupied by Pakistan, which we refer to as the POK or Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. So as a result, India lacks connectivity with Central Asia region, and the only viable route through which India can connect with Central Asia is via Iran, through which India can connect with Afghanistan and then later with the Central Asian countries. Since Pakistan keeps refusing transit access to India to connect with Afghanistan, the only viable route for India to connect with Afghanistan and then later with Central Asia is through Iran. That's the reason why India has been pursuing strategic connectivity projects with Iran, such as the Chabahar Port Project and the INSTC project or the International North-South Transport Corridor, which would give India access to the Bandar Abbas port of Iran. Through these ports, India hopes to connect with Afghanistan and then later reach Central Asia. But however, despite these ambitious plans, India's outreach to Central Asia has been very limited, and even though it enjoys close political and strategic relations, it hasn't been really able to grow the economic relations, primarily due to lack of connectivity. But as India has been playing a minimal role in Central Asia, these former Soviet republics, they have become a playground for a great power game in the region, which is being played out between few global powers and regional powers. See, in this region, Russia, of course, is the most dominant influence, and it exercises tremendous political and military influence in all these countries, because all the five Central Asian republics, they happen to be former states of the Soviet Union, and Russia, as the successor state to the Soviet Union, exercises tremendous influence in the region. This is only followed by China's influence, which shares an immediate border with these countries, and China in particular exercises tremendous economic influence in Central Asia. The United States, on the other hand, had extended its influence into the region after the Cold War ended, and it not only invested in the region, but had even set up military bases in the region. But however, of late, the American influence in the region is on the decline, primarily because of its hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. The military retreat of the US from Afghanistan marked the decline of American military and strategic influence in the region, and this power vacuum, which has been left behind by the US, is being gladly filled by Russia and China. Then you have smaller players like Pakistan and even Iran, which exercise considerable influence. And then you have the volatile situation in Afghanistan, which directly affects the bordering countries such as Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. So, in the midst of this great power game, India is trying to find a space for itself because India's core interests in the region are under the threat of being compromised, primarily due to the current situation in Afghanistan. Even though India exercises a certain degree of strategic and military influence in the region, it is being severely undermined by the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan and the withdrawal of American presence and influence in the region. It's important to note that India does have close security relations with some of these countries. In fact, India even maintains and operates a strategic air base in Tajikistan known as the Farkhor Air Base, and it is said to be maintained by India's intelligence agency, the Research and Analysis Wing. This minimal military presence of India in Central Asia is crucial considering the proximity of Tajikistan to Afghanistan and, more importantly, its proximity to POK and Pakistan. In the past, India had stepped up its economic and strategic engagement with the region by making small investments and by even extending line of credits to these Central Asian countries. It had drawn up ambitious plans to access the natural resources of the region via Iran and Afghanistan. But now these plans of India have fallen apart due to the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan and also due to India's deteriorating relations with Iran. So it is in this context that India has sought a greater engagement with Central Asian countries. And this is what explains India's motivation to hold the first ever India Central Asia Summit and invite these leaders for the Republic Day. According to the writer, this renewed outreach of India is more driven by geopolitical considerations than geo-economic considerations. The writer says that this new outreach of India towards Central Asian republics is a direct result of the current situation in Afghanistan, where the withdrawal of American presence and the decline of American influence has directly hit Indian interests. Now it is very likely that this power vacuum will be filled by a possible nexus between China, Pakistan, and the Taliban. Now, if such a nexus were to develop, it would be a nightmare scenario for India because this would have direct implications along several key locations in the region, including the line of control with Pakistan, the line of actual control with China, and more importantly, over the status of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So this retreat of US from the region has directly affected and compromised India's core interests, and hence India has sought a greater collaboration with the most dominant power of Central Asia, that is Russia. Over the last couple of years, it has been noticed that there appears to be a greater collaboration between India and Russia to engage with the Central Asian countries. In fact, both the countries even brought out a non-paper which outlines the way forward for India-Russia collaboration in the Central Asian region. As I mentioned earlier, Russia is clearly the most dominant power in the region and exercises tremendous political and military influence. But of late, the Russian influence is being directly threatened by the rising economic and strategic influence of China. As I mentioned, China not only shares a land border with some of these countries, but it has already emerged as the largest investor through its Belt and Road Initiative, and China is funding the creation of several critical infrastructure projects in Central Asian countries. It also happens to be the largest trading partner of all the Central Asian countries. So this economic dominance of China is quickly translating into strategic and political dominance as well, which threatens the interests of Russia. Even though Russia and China happen to be close allies, Russia wouldn't like to lose its predominant position because even Russia has a few concerns about China's expansion and China's aggression. So this has led India and Russia to collaborate to try and offset the dominant influence that China is gaining. And to achieve this, the two countries have even proposed a joint regional security initiative under which India and Russia can collaborate with the Central Asian countries and explore the potential for greater military and economic engagement with the region. This non-paper which has been brought out between India and Russia proposes joint defense production between India and Russia in the defense factories of Soviet era located in the Central Asian countries. It also proposes hosting trilateral military exercises between India, Russia, and the Central Asian countries. And this shows India's increasing reliance on Russia to protect some of its core interests in the Central Asian region. But however, this is more of a geopolitical outreach by India than geo-economic. And the success of this strategy will be entirely dependent on India's ability to access Central Asia, and this directly depends on India's ties with Iran. Because Iran is the only viable connection for India to Central Asian countries. But unfortunately, India's ties with Iran has been severely compromised over the last few years due to the targeting of Iran's nuclear weapons program by the United States, which has imposed crippling economic sanctions on Iran. India eventually fell under American pressure and has started abiding by these economic sanctions, which has hit the India-Iran relationship. So the future of India-Iran relationship is entirely dependent on the ongoing talks to revive the Iran nuclear deal, also known as the JCPOA or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. If this deal is revived and if an agreement is struck between Iran and US, it could reduce the tensions between them, resulting in the possible lifting of American sanctions. This would allow India the opportunity to repair and rebuild its ties with Iran and further work on using Iran to connect with Central Asia. But considering the limited economic influence of India in Iran and Central Asia, and as well as in Afghanistan, the writer says that these outreaches by India might give very minimal gains. But however, India cannot afford to not engage with the region at all because that would prove to be very costly as it won't be able to check a possible nexus between China, Pakistan, and the Taliban. Now let's look at this article from page number 16 from the online edition of The Hindu, which helps us understand what are artificial neural networks. See, there are many things that computers can do better than human beings, be it complex mathematical calculations, or be it the ability to multitask complex parallel tasks, or even the ability to function without fatigue. In all these aspects, computers are definitely better than human beings. But however, humans are one step ahead on the evolution curve when it comes to our incredible brain and neuron structure and its ability to make logical and rational decisions, and its ability to respond swiftly and instantaneously to external stimuli. So, given this superb computing power of the human brain, computer scientists have tried since 1950s to replicate the structure and the performance of the human brain, and the key to this lies in the developing of the building block of a brain, which is nothing but the neuron. If we are able to simulate the functioning of a human neuron through computer programming and computer hardware, and if it is able to mimic the functioning of billions of neurons acting as a common network, then we can succeed in the building of an artificial neural network. So essentially, the artificial neural networks, they are inspired by the structure of the human brain, and they are designed and developed using computers, hardware, and computer programming to make computers more human-like in their response, in their reaction, and in their performance. See, human brains can interpret the context of real-world situations in a way that computers can't. So to address this issue with regard to computing, artificial neural networks were first developed in the 1950s, and since then, this has been a cutting-edge field of science and technology. An artificial neural network is an attempt to simulate the network of neurons that make up a human brain so that the computer will also be able to learn things and make decisions in a human-like manner. These artificial neural networks, they are created by computer programming and they can start behaving as though they are interconnected brain cells. To understand how these artificial neural networks work, we need to take a look at this schematic. See, these artificial neural networks, they make use of different layers of mathematical processing to make sense of the information that is being fed into the system. Typically, an artificial neural network has anywhere from dozens to millions of artificial neurons called the units, which are arranged in a series of layers. Here in this schematic, you can see one such unit of an artificial neural network. Each unit of the artificial neural network consists of an input layer, an output layer, and a hidden layer. This input layer receives various forms of information or essentially data from the outside world. That is, data from the outside is fed into the system through the input layer, and this data is processed through the network as per the desired function and the desired output. From the input layer, the data goes through one or more hidden units, and the hidden unit's job is to transform the input into something that the output unit can utilize. The majority of these neural networks are fully connected from one layer to another, and higher the number of these connections, the greater would be the ability of these units to influence one another, just like a human brain. That is, these neural units, which are interconnected through a series of layers, they interact and influence with each other, just like the human neurons in our brain and in our nervous system. On the other side of this network, the output units bring out the desired response based on the data that was fed into the network. See, cognitive neuroscientists have learned a tremendous amount about the human brain since computer scientists first attempted the original artificial neural network. One of the things they learned is that different parts of the brain are responsible for processing different aspects of information. And these parts of the brain are arranged hierarchically. So when the input comes into the brain and each level of neurons provide insight, and then the information gets passed on to the next and the more senior level of neurons through this hierarchy. This is exactly the information processing mechanism that artificial neural networks are trying to replicate. Essentially, the aim is to create such a neural network which will be able to learn on its own, just like the human brain. And for this learning, that is machine learning, to happen, there needs to be a tremendous amount of information or data that is fed into the network. This data, which helps in training the computer algorithms, is referred to as the training set. And this is what forms the very basis of machine learning. So the field of data science specializes in harnessing the required data for these artificial neural networks and smart algorithms. And once the training data set is fed, it will enable the machine to learn. And during this training period, the machine's output is compared to the desired output or to the human provided description of what should have been the observed output. And whatever is the difference between the real output and the desired output, this is fed back into the system in a loop through a feedback mechanism that is known as back propagation. That is, whatever error the neural network makes in its learning process, it is fed back into the system so that this automatically helps in improving the data set, thereby making it easier for the machine to learn through a series of steps in order to make the machine more autonomous. So if all of this seemed a little too technical, let's break it down by looking at how artificial neural networks can be applied in the real world. By looking at the applications, you will be able to develop a better understanding of artificial neural networks. So essentially, through a combination of data science, machine learning, and artificial neural networks, we can create an AI system or artificial intelligence platform which is able to think and perform actions on its own autonomously. Such AI algorithms can be applied to automate several tasks, including facial recognition, speech recognition, by making use of a higher grade of computer learning known as deep learning. Deep learning is essentially one step above machine learning, where the artificial neural networks are stacked up in multiple layers and they are trained to detect certain patterns and parameters as per the input data which is fed, and they start making an attempt to produce the desired output. Based on the errors that occur, a feedback mechanism known as back propagation is put in place, which enables the system to learn in a step-by-step manner, and this higher grade of learning by the system is referred to as deep learning. So this enables a smart AI algorithm to detect images, to recognize speech, and also to automate several other tasks. These technologies have really matured with the emergence of cloud computing, as it has made enormous computer resources available that are needed for carrying out complex calculations, and it has been further enabled by developments in the field of GPU or graphic processing unit. GPUs are primarily employed in artificial neural networks because of their ability in performing massive parallel tasks, and these computer hardwares, in combination with the computer software, delivers a smart neural network which makes use of relevant data to produce an AI system or artificial intelligence system. It is this technology which forms the basis of several applications that we already have on our smartphones. For example, the image recognition and speech recognition platforms on our smartphones and on our mobile applications are nothing but AI-driven platforms which are making use of artificial neural networks. Then even the voice assistant on our phone, like Siri or Alexa, even they are driven by AI platforms which are built on artificial neural networks. So as you can see, this technology has immense potential to replicate some of the functions of the human brain. And we are already witnessing that these technologies, particularly data science, machine learning and deep learning, artificial neural networks, and artificial intelligence, they are already driving the fourth stage of the industrial revolution, which is leading to rapid advancements in the field of automation. Now let's look at this editorial from page number 6, which evaluates the proposed rollout of 5G networks in India. See, in the recent union budget, the finance minister announced that India is all set to roll out 5G networks in this year itself. So this announcement by the government has triggered intense speculation as to how the government is going to handle the 5G policy, and hence the editorial cautions that the government should first weigh the economic benefits of rolling out 5G networks, and it should ensure that the economic benefits should outweigh the high cost involved in the rollout of 5G technology. So the government is looking to introduce 5G networks as soon as possible in order to leverage its potential to carry forward the fourth stage of the industrial revolution, which we just discussed, which is largely powered by technologies such as artificial intelligence. 5G networks are designed to enable high bandwidth operations, and it can not only carry high-end computer applications, but it could also lead to a major economic revolution that could transform industries and bring enormous economic benefits, along with job creation that could drive the future growth curve of India. To enable this rollout, the government has already directed the telecom sector regulator, that is the TRAI or the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, to come out with recommendations for the spectrum or the frequencies that would be allotted to 5G networks, and also to lay down a policy roadmap for allocating this spectrum by auctioning this valuable spectrum to the private players. But before the government rolls out this policy and takes up the auctioning of 5G spectrum, first it needs to carefully evaluate the technological hurdles that lie ahead and also carefully evaluate the economic benefits, because installing and rolling out 5G networks is going to be a highly capital intensive affair. Now, this is of great concern because our private telecom players are already overstressed, and the Indian telecom market has essentially become a duopoly between just two players, that is Jio and Airtel. The other smaller players have been almost driven out of competition, and in such a scenario, it is not sure as to what benefits 5G networks can truly bring, at least in the immediate to short term. See, there is no doubt about the long-term benefits of 5G networks. It is going to become an essential infrastructure for driving the fourth stage of the industrial revolution. But however, the real-world applications of 5G networks is still a few years away. As of now, there is not much of an appetite in the industry and amongst the users for the high-end applications that would be carried by 5G networks. In such a scenario, if the government rushes to introduce 5G networks, which would require enormous amounts of capital investment by the private players, it might end up defeating the long-term objectives, because the high capital expenditure would unnecessarily strain the current telecom service providers, and it could even affect the delivery of 4G services, as it would draw away the energy, the attention, and the capital of the private companies. At this stage, India won't be able to afford a compromise in the quality of 4G and 3G services, because these telecom networks are still the critical backbone of the Indian economy. The pandemic has already shown how crucial internet could be, especially with regard to essential services like education, healthcare, and government services. And the telecom service providers have already struggled to deliver these basic services through the existing networks. And hence, one can't shift the focus away from further strengthening the existing networks. So the editorial cautions that a sudden and unplanned shift towards 5G networks could compromise the existing telecom infrastructure, and the adverse impact of this would be felt by the rural economy and especially by key sectors such as education, healthcare, and government services. Plus, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India will also have to work out the technical specifications of the frequency allocation, and any rush by the government to fast track the rollout without working out these specifics and these concerns would end up placing a huge capital cost on the private telecom companies, and it could even adversely affect the economy, which is still dependent on the existing telecom networks. So that's the reason why the editorial praises the plans to roll out 5G networks. But however, this should be a long-term strategy which is well thought out. But in the short to medium term, the government will have to first weigh the economic benefits and ensure that it outweighs the high cost, so as to ensure that the rollout of 5G networks shouldn't compromise the ability of the telecom companies to continue delivering high quality services through 4G, 3G networks. Now let's look at the mains practice questions. The first question. Of late, there has been a renewed enthusiasm in New Delhi to engage the Central Asian region. While the gains from engaging Central Asia may be minimal, non-engagement could be costly. Analyze. The second question. What do you understand by artificial neural networks? Examine how it has made artificial intelligence more powerful. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link shall be given in the description box below. So with this, let's conclude our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.